Stripe acquires AI middleware giant OpenRouter for $7 billion. An autonomous AI agent scores a perfect 100% on the famously difficult ARC-AGI test, and OpenAI partners with Nvidia to build a massive 8-gigawatt mega campus on a Cold War-era uranium site. Welcome to this week's Rundown. I am your host, Anna. This podcast is researched and produced by Etienne Newman, professional engineer and founder at Jamgamind from Calgary, Alberta in Canada. Today, we perform a forensic autopsy on megascale consolidation and the reasoning breakthroughs for the week of August 17th to August 23, 2026. The artificial intelligence industry has officially entered its infrastructure and consolidation era. Financial giant Stripe has purchased model routing platform OpenRouter for a staggering $7 billion, planting its flag firmly at the center of the AI middleware economy. On the physical front, compute constraints are forcing historic measures. Nvidia is backing an up to $105 billion credit line to build an 8-gigawatt data center for OpenAI in Ohio. While the hardware scales, the software is crossing mathematical red lines. A medical doctor running agentic swarms on GPT 5.6 Sol has successfully solved a matrix problem that has stumped mathematicians for 22 years. Simultaneously, an NVIDIA-built agent wrapper just achieved the first-ever perfect score on the ARC-AGI reasoning benchmark, proving that intelligent scaffolding is now just as important as raw model size. Before we break down the telemetry of these events, please hit follow or subscribe to the channel on Apple Podcasts to always listen completely ads-free. Let's unpack the data.
So right now, out in Pike County, Ohio, there is this old Cold War-era uranium enrichment plant that is just being completely hollowed out.
Right, but they aren't, prepping it for more nuclear material.
No, exactly. They are making room for 8 gigawatts of artificial intelligence infrastructure.
Which is just a staggering number to even say out loud.
It really is. I mean, just to put that in perspective for you, a typical nuclear reactor generates about 1 gigawatt of power. So we are looking at a single data center campus that's designed to consume the energy equivalent of, 8 nuclear power plants.
Yeah, we aren't really watching a tech ecosystem organically grow anymore.
No.
We're watching the pouring of industrial concrete on a scale we honestly haven't seen since the Manhattan Project.
It's the complete phase shift, and that's exactly why we need a very specific set of lenses for our deep dive today.
Right, we can't just look at this like standard tech enthusiasts anymore.
Exactly. We are acting as forensic venture strategists and sovereign infrastructure analysts today.
Which sounds intense, but it's the only way to really understand what's happening.
Right. We are going to perform a holistic autopsy on the mega-scale consolidation and really the reasoning breakthroughs that defined this past week, specifically the week of August 17th to August 23rd, 2026.
Because the AI ecosystem has officially graduated, right?
Yeah.
It's moved from software experiments into Cold War-scale physical infrastructure.
And aggressive financial takeovers, yeah. But before we start dissecting all this heavy machinery, I do need to note that this podcast is researched and produced by Etienne Newman, professional engineer and founder at Jamgamind from Calgary, Alberta in Canada.
And honestly, it is the perfect week to apply that forensic lens.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you have these massive, seemingly disconnected moves across, commercial real estate, global finance, cognitive science, and even geopolitics.
Right.
But they are actually all part of the exact same circulatory system.
So let's start with the physical heartbeat of that system, right? Out in Ohio, OpenAI and Nvidia are backing this massive 8-gigawatt campus.
Yeah, leasing it from SB Energy.
Right, and they're targeting 800 megawatts just for the initial phase by 2028. But to me, the physical concrete is almost less interesting than the financial concrete holding this deal together.
Oh, the capital structure is fascinating.
Because Nvidia is obviously supplying all the chips for this, right? But they are also backing the build-out with a staggering $105 billion of their own credit.
Right.
And Jensen Huang is out there explicitly stating that the industry is constrained by infrastructure and financing, not by customer demand.
And that $105 billion credit facility, that's really the canary in the coal mine for how this whole industry operates now.
How so?
Well, we have moved entirely beyond traditional venture capital. I mean, there's no VC firm on earth that can underwrite an 8-gigawatt, $100 billion hardware deployment.
True.
So when physical compute constraints force a transition to this scale, standard corporate debt just breaks down. Nvidia is essentially acting as a macroeconomic central bank for AI compute.
I have to challenge that setup a little bit, though. I mean, Jensen Huang did deny the allegations of circular financing, right? He insisted that OpenAI is going to be the one paying the lease.
He did say that, yes.
But if the chip supplier is fronting the money for the real estate just to house the chips that the customer is buying from them, isn't this essentially a massive company store dynamic?
It definitely looks like that.
Right. Like, are frontier labs like OpenAI now just basically debt vehicles for chip makers to juice their own quarterly earnings?
So it looks exactly like a company store on the surface.
Why?
But a company store usually implies a captive audience with no other options. Right.
Like exploiting the buyer.
Exactly. What Nvidia is actually doing here is aggressively de-risking the physical bottleneck. In a normal market, OpenAI would go to a bank, they'd raise the capital, build the data center, and then order the chips.
Sure.
But banks do not know how to underwrite the depreciation of AI hardware that, frankly, becomes obsolete in 18 months.
Okay. But Nvidia does.
Precisely. Nvidia is stepping in because compute is now a scarce physical resource, much like oil or, enriched uranium.
Right.
Nvidia realizes that if they don't finance the refinery, they simply can't sell the oil. Now, you were totally right to point out the systemic vulnerability there.
Because it ties them together?
Exactly. By collateralizing OpenAI's future revenue to finance the immediate sale of its own hardware, Nvidia is tying its balance sheet directly to OpenAI's ability to monetize those models.
Wow. So if OpenAI stumbles, Nvidia isn't just left with some unsold chips.
No, they're holding the bag on a multi-billion-dollar real estate and energy contract.
And that desperation to monetize the compute, that perfectly explains the absolute frenzy we were seeing one layer up in the financial stack, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
Because if physical compute is the new oil, then the financial layers that route the user demand to those refineries are becoming unbelievably lucrative.
Which brings us to Stripe.
Exactly. Stripe is currently acquiring an AI middleware startup called OpenRouter for $7 billion.
Which is just a masterclass in infrastructure capture.
But wait, OpenRouter doesn't even build models.
No, they don't train anything.
Right. They just route developer tasks across, more than 400 different models to find the cheapest or fastest option for that specific prompt.
Yeah, they're just the switchboard.
But their activity exploded from 5 trillion to 25 trillion tokens in just 6 months. And for context for you listening, 25 trillion tokens is roughly equivalent to processing the entire text of the internet multiple times over.
In 6 months.
In 6 months. And at the exact same time, Stripe and Advent International are reportedly in talks to buy PayPal, valuing it at $53 billion.
Yeah.
If they pull that off, they create this mega processor handling $3.7 trillion a year in volume, including Venmo.
And you really have to look at how those two acquisitions interact with each other.
Well, I look at it and think, Stripe is buying the toll booths on the internet, and now they're trying to buy the entire highway system and the traffic cops, too.
That's a good way to put it.
But my question is, why drop $7 billion on a company that just routes traffic instead of investing that capital into building a proprietary model themselves? Aren't they leaving themselves entirely at the mercy of the model builders? Like, if OpenAI or Meta just decide to close their APIs, Stripe's expensive router suddenly has nothing to route.
See, that is the traditional software way of thinking, but it totally ignores the current reality of the model training arms race.
Which is what?
That race is just brutal right now. It requires, as we literally just discussed, $105 billion credit lines and former uranium plants just to compete.
Fair point.
And more importantly, the models themselves are rapidly commoditizing. You have open weight models from companies like Alibaba and Meta just flooding the market, which is driving the cost of raw intelligence down to near zero.
Okay, so Stripe doesn't want to fight in a race to the bottom with these capital-intensive factories.
Precisely. They're betting that intelligence just becomes a utility, like electricity.
So they are buying the API gateway.
Exactly. The router dictates which model gets the workload based on latency and cost in a fraction of a millisecond. If you own the router, you own the customer relationship.
Wow.
You control the margins of the entire ecosystem without absorbing any of the financial risk of actually training the models.
That is wild.
And then you pair that with a $53 billion PayPal acquisition. Stripe isn't just routing AI tokens to the cheapest server anymore.
They are settling the payments.
Right. They are seamlessly settling the fiat microtransactions for every single automated task those tokens generate. They are laying the absolute financial plumbing for an automated agentic economy.
Which brings us perfectly to the cognitive reality of what is actually being routed through that plumbing.
Yes, the reasoning breakthroughs.
Because the tokens flying through OpenRouter, they aren't just basic chatbot queries anymore, right? The reason Stripe and Nvidia are risking hundreds of billions of dollars is because raw parameter scaling, just, throwing more data at a bigger model, that has officially been superseded by something much more profound.
The shift from monolithic model intelligence to agentic scaffolding.
Exactly.
This is the reasoning breakthrough the industry has been waiting for.
And we have two incredible data points from the sources this week to back this up. First, we have Nvidia's AVO coding agent.
Right.
It's essentially a wrapper built around Anthropic's Claude Opus 5. Now, for some context, the ARC-AGI-3 public test is basically the ultimate IQ test for AI reasoning.
It's notoriously difficult.
Yeah, it tests spatial and logic puzzles that humans find super intuitive, but AI historically just fails miserably at. By itself, Opus 5 only scored 30% on this test.
Which is standard.
Right, but when Nvidia wrapped it in this AVO software layer, it guided the exact same model to a perfect 100% score.
It's unbelievable.
They cleared 183 levels and 25 games without any prior instructions, executing over 6,600 actions.
We really have to unpack the mechanism here, because this completely redefines the capability frontier for these systems.
Please do, because how exactly does a wrapper make a model 70% smarter without changing the underlying code of the model itself?
Okay, so think of the base model, Opus 5, as a brilliant, highly capable, but incredibly impulsive intern.
Okay, I like that.
If you ask the intern a really complex question, they just blurt out the first answer that comes to mind, which is often wrong.
Right, it's just predicting the next word.
Exactly. So what the AVO wrapper does is it acts as a strict algorithmic project manager. It literally forces the intern to stop, break the problem down into sequential steps, write code to test its own hypothesis, run that code in a sandbox.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, observe if it fails, and then rewrite the code based on that memory of failure.
So it's not just answering, it's iterating.
Yes. It introduces trial, error, and memory loops into a system that was previously just a static text predictor.
So it's essentially forcing the AI to think before it speaks.
Exactly.
And the second data point takes that exact mechanism to an absolute extreme, because we have a neurosurgery resident in Beijing named Shenmu Jin who just solved Croiset's conjecture.
Which is a massive deal in mathematics.
It really is. It's a highly complex matrix math problem that has remained completely unsolved by the world's top mathematicians for 22 years.
Yep.
But Jin didn't build a massive new supermodel to do this. He used swarms of GPT 5.6 Sol subagents.
Right.
He took them offline, and he ran an autonomous session for 16 straight hours. A medical doctor who just taught herself advanced math beat the entire mathematics community using a ChatGPT subscription.
It is just a stunning validation of agentic swarms.
But I have to ask you, doesn't this completely destroy the traditional definition of a domain expert?
It certainly challenges it.
Yeah.
Like if a doctor can solve a 22-year-old math problem while he sleeps just by telling an AI to figure it out, does human expertise just become a verification bottleneck now?
It absolutely shifts the premium of human capital. I mean, for centuries, an expert was someone who held a vast amount of specialized domain knowledge right in their head.
Right.
But Jin didn't need to hold the knowledge. He needed to architect the swarm.
He structured the environment. Exactly. He borrowed a structural recipe from OpenAI. He actively denied the model internet access to prevent it from getting distracted or, hallucinating based on web junk.
Sorry.
And he forced these subagents to endlessly debate and verify each other's mathematical logic for 16 hours.
He essentially built a digital autonomous research lab on his laptop.
He did. The human's role shifts radically from generation to formal verification and structural direction.
Because generation is cheap now.
Generation is abundant and cheap. The bottleneck is auditing the output. I mean, in fact, Cornell mathematicians had to step in to formally verify Jin's proof after the fact.
That's incredible.
So the expert of the future is the human who knows how to build the best agentic scaffolding, not the one who memorizes the most formulas.
But, having a swarm of digital interns capable of autonomously solving decades-old math problems, that introduces a terrifying new variable into the corporate reality, doesn't it?
Oh, massively.
Because as these models hit these unprecedented reasoning milestones, the risks are violently reshaping the corporate hierarchy.
We saw that this week with OpenAI.
Exactly. OpenAI has literally slammed on the brakes. They paused their largest frontier reinforcement learning run this week.
Yeah.
They are entirely rewriting their preparedness framework, and they're dedicating 20% of their total compute just to monitoring an unreleased model called Astra.
And we really have to be clear about what that implies.
Yeah, please.
Under OpenAI's own safety frameworks, dedicating that level of compute to containment suggests that Astra may have actually hit their critical cyber risk threshold.
Which means what, practically speaking?
It means the model demonstrated the theoretical ability to autonomously exploit systems or write zero-day malware or even persuade human actors to grant it access to secure environments.
No, wow.
Yeah. When a model transitions from just answering text prompts to executing 6,600 autonomous actions, like we saw with the AVO wrapper, the surface area for catastrophic failure just grows exponentially.
Now, they are burning a fifth of their processing power just watching the model to make sure it doesn't break out of its sandbox.
Essentially, yes.
And what happens while they slam on the brakes to play defense? Anthropic physically eats their lunch in the open market.
The timing is incredible.
Anthropic just overtook OpenAI in Q2 revenue, pulling in $11.6 billion compared to OpenAI's $6.7 billion.
Right.
Anthropic actually turned a small profit and is boasting a $65 billion annualized run rate. The timing is just brutal. So is strict safety monitoring becoming a fatal competitive disadvantage in this capital environment?
See, if you view this solely through the lens of shipping consumer chat products, yes, it looks like a fatal delay.
Okay.
But if we dissect that revenue shift, Anthropic's surge to an $11.6 billion quarter is overwhelmingly driven by enterprise adoption and deployment tools like Claude Code.
So businesses are choosing Anthropic over OpenAI. But why?
Because enterprise clients do not tolerate unmanaged cyber risk.
Ah, okay.
Fortune 500 companies want stability and privacy. They don't want a rogue agent that might inadvertently leak their proprietary data or, execute a malicious script on their servers.
Right, that would be a disaster.
The cost of security, like dedicating 20% of compute to monitor Astra, is staggering, yes. But an unmanaged cyber incident can evaporate a multi-billion-dollar valuation overnight.
That makes sense.
And OpenAI knows this. They are currently testing a service called private safety processing to address this exact tension.
How does that work? Like, how do you monitor a model for safety without reading the raw data the user is putting in?
It relies on cryptographic separation.
Okay.
Private safety processing isolates the monitoring layer from the inference layer.
Yeah.
So it looks for structural patterns of abuse like the algorithmic signatures of malware generation without actually logging or reading the user's proprietary prompt.
That sounds incredibly complex.
It is highly complex. But it is the absolute reality of deploying autonomous reasoning entities. Pausing their largest run isn't just corporate altruism from OpenAI.
Right, it's business.
It is the realization that at this scale of deployment, safety architecture is no longer a feature. It is the core product constraint.
But that enterprise demand for absolute control, it doesn't stop at Fortune 500 companies, though.
No, it scales up.
It scales up to entire governments. And that brings us to the geopolitical ultimatums happening right now. The sheer power and economic value of these reasoning engines have escaped the corporate boardroom and landed directly on the desks of world leaders.
We are essentially observing the formalization of digital sovereignty.
Yes. The U.S. State Department is forcing 35 allied nations to choose between U.S. and Chinese AI frameworks. They're calling it the Pax Silica Supply Chain Initiative.
Pax Silica, right.
And countries like Japan and Australia are fully in. Kazakhstan is apparently trying to straddle the fence, and Europe is currently struggling for what they call strategic autonomy. Now, we are impartial here. We just want to look at the mechanics of this. What is this actually doing?
Well, Pax Silica is not just a software standards agreement.
Okay.
It is a sovereign infrastructure play. It's designed to corner the physical supply chains that make those 8-gigawatt data centers in Ohio possible in the first place.
Because it all goes back to the physical materials.
Exactly. You cannot run an autonomous agent swarm without the underlying silicon. And you cannot manufacture that silicon without critical minerals.
Right. Which explains Kazakhstan.
Exactly. Kazakhstan is straddling the fence because they possess massive reserves of uranium and rare earth metals. They have leverage.
Right.
The U.S. is basically attempting to draw a hard line to secure those physical inputs globally.
It is the digital equivalent of the Iron Curtain falling, but, built out of silicon and power purchase agreements.
That's exactly what it is.
And at the exact same time, on the other side of that curtain, you have ByteDance. the Chinese parent company of TikTok, striking a historic framework with Hollywood's Motion Picture Association, the MPA.
Which is a brilliant, highly sophisticated countermaneuver.
Because they are baking copyright protections directly into their Seedance and Seedream generative video models, which affects all their apps globally, including CapCut.
Right.
But from a strategic level, why would a major Chinese tech giant suddenly care so deeply about enforcing Hollywood's intellectual property rights?
Because they are weaponizing copyright compliance as a geopolitical shield.
Oh, wow.
ByteDance understands that for their AI assets to operate globally and actually generate revenue, they need indisputable legitimacy.
Right.
So by striking a proactive deal with the MPA, they are integrating Hollywood's copyright frameworks into their foundational models.
So they're basically making it legally impossible for the West to ban them.
Exactly. Think about the legal judo happening here.
Yeah.
If a Western government tries to ban ByteDance models on vague grounds of, say, national security, ByteDance can point to the MPA deal and say, wait, we are the only platform strictly enforcing your own copyright laws on a structural level.
Banning us actively harms your own domestic creators and film studios.
Precisely. It is an acknowledgement that in a splintered sovereign ecosystem, aggressive compliance with regional intellectual property laws is the cost of market access.
That is fascinating.
They are legally embedding themselves into Western cultural supply chains so deeply that they cannot be excised.
It is a massive multi-dimensional chess game. I mean, we have the U.S. trying to wall off the physical hardware and mineral supply chains, and we have Chinese firms legally anchoring themselves into the Western cultural and legal infrastructure.
It just confirms that the AI ecosystem has permanently transitioned from a commercial software market into a domain of grand geopolitical strategy.
It really has. So let's synthesize what we've unpacked for you today. We started by looking at the physical foundations. 8-gigawatt data centers being built on old Cold War uranium plants, bankrolled by $105 billion in vendor financing, which is essentially turning chip makers into macroeconomic central banks.
Right.
Then we moved up the stack to the $50 billion financial consolidations, with Stripe acquiring the API routing gateways to own the transactional layer of the internet.
The plumbing.
The plumbing, exactly. Then we explored the cognitive leaps models, hitting 100% reasoning benchmarks through agentic scaffolding, and autonomous swarms solving 22-year-old math problems, while the human operator literally sleeps.
Incredible.
And we saw how the immense risks of these autonomous capabilities are forcing companies like OpenAI to pause their operations, allowing rivals like Anthropic to seize the enterprise revenue lead.
Because safety is the bottleneck now.
Exactly. And finally, we looked at how all of this compute and capital has triggered global geopolitical ultimatums, weaponizing both critical minerals and copyright law in this bifurcated digital world.
When you look at the entirety of that circulatory system, the picture is undeniable.
Yeah.
The entities that control the physical compute and the financial infrastructure that routes demand to that compute, they're the ones who will dictate the economics of the next century.
Which leaves you with one final thought to mull over today. We've talked about models reasoning autonomously for 16 hours to solve complex math problems. We've talked about the massive infrastructure being built to power them. But what happens when these multi-agent swarms, running on 8-gigawatt sovereign data centers, are finally given unrestricted access to Stripe's $3.7 trillion financial routing network?
That's the real question.
Are we just building highly capable tools, or are we actively financing the infrastructure for a new digital species to autonomously operate our global economy? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the architecture of the future.
That concludes our forensic briefing for the week of August 23rd, 2026. The strategic signal for this week is the triumph of scaffolding. For years, the industry believed that raw parameter count was the only path to artificial general intelligence. But this week, a medical doctor solved a 22-year-old math problem, and Nvidia aced the notoriously difficult ARC-AGI benchmark, not by waiting for a larger model, but by building brilliant agentic wrappers around existing ones. Intelligence is no longer just about the base model. It is about how you orchestrate it. Enterprise leaders must stop waiting for the next frontier release and start engineering the agentic workflows that extract maximum reasoning from the tools available today. If you are ready to secure your company's infrastructure and exit volatile cloud dependencies, check the show notes for our curated AI Executive Toolkit. If you found value in today's AI briefing, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It takes 10 seconds and helps other AI enthusiasts discover the show. I am Anna. Stay sharp and keep unraveling the future.
And before you go, if your company is building the tools that power the workflows we talked about today, I'd love to showcase them to this audience. We don't just run ads, we build technical simulations that prove your value. Let's build something together. Visit jamgamind.com/partners to get started. Until next time, keep building. Before we go, one of the stories in my kids' app is about Garrett Morgan, who left school at 14, saw a crash at a crossroads, and invented the yellow traffic light. Every amber light in the world exists because of him. That app is a finalist in a Canadian pitch competition, and a public vote decides the final 5. 20 seconds, 1 vote per person, closes September 22nd. Links in the show notes.